And over to you, Simona.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Simona Iliuț. I've been with SAP Ariba for 11 years. Some of you I have exchanged via email. Some of you we had meetings. It is nice to meet you. I have full suite knowledge, and today I am here to share with you my experience and the best practices in terms of the creation and the running of auctions in SAP Ariba Strategic Sourcing. I'm hoping that by the end of this session, you guys, be it end users, so buyers who want to plan or run auctions, as well as administrators who manage the auction templates, I hope that you're going to be able to understand what exactly an auction is. And this is important for us to be aligned and to agree that we all have the same understanding on what does an auction mean for SAP Ariba, for an e-auction. The e-auction, it's a real-time online pricing negotiation that basically will allow you to attempt to drive prices down or up. And we will see that this will depend on the type of template that you use. If you're driving the prices down, it means that you want to run reverse auctions, so auctions that are for buying. Or if you're driving the price up, that means that you are running auctions where you want to sell. We call them forward auctions in Ariba. And we do this by sharing some competitive information within the supply base. This will be the lead bid, the rank, all the offers, or we will see that no information can be displayed for the Dutch auction. So the SAP Ariba sourcing module that you guys have been using with the full project and the envelopes and the RFP includes this last step or this last sourcing event that we call an auction. And we allow you, or we include several auction types for very different bidding situations. The purpose of this webinar or this session is to discuss these different templates, to discuss the different auctions available, and try to provide you in 2 or 3 examples for each auction type, and provide you with best practices for planning and configuring an auction. I'm sorry, just for 1 second, please. Apologies. I need to close the window just for 1 second, please, because I
Sure.
realized I didn't close it, so I don't want the noise.
Sure, no problem.
Okay. So the agenda for today is very short, I would say. I'm going to take you through the auction types and some general use cases. I'm going to provide you some example bidding scenarios and auction settings. And if we have time, I would like to be able to review the auction templates and the settings to see a little bit what you guys have available in your realm. In this session, I'm hoping you're going to be able to learn the different auction types that are available in Ariba, explore the difference between the bidding transformation and the non-transformation auctions. We're going to see some examples of bidding and market scenarios, and I would like you to be able to position yourself in the mindset that you need to be able to select what auction type you need to run depending on the market conditions. So by the end of this session, you will be able to know how many different SAP Ariba auctions we have and how do they work and when to use them. And I'm hoping you're going to be able a little bit to familiarize yourselves with the configuration and needs that you need to do in based on the analysis of the market conditions. So in SAP Ariba, once again, auction, it's a real-time pricing negotiation where buyer sets up the rules and supplier organizations or vendors fight. The auction comes at the very end of your negotiation. What does this mean? In a multi-stage sourcing event with a request for information, request for proposal process, you may choose, because you consider the market allows you to do so, and because you have a margin that you want to further negotiate with your suppliers, you may decide to run an auction. We often say that the auction negotiates or allows you to only negotiate the pricing. It means that in an auction, you are not going to ask suppliers to provide you technical specifications and answers, and you evaluate their performance. All of these elements are done in a prior event, which is the RFP. In Ariba, the auction is considered to be the most complex event, and a successful auction corresponds to an auction where a buyer is able to properly set up a strategy and an auction in Ariba. But as equally important is the communication you have with the suppliers, as well as the time that you give suppliers to familiarize themselves with the auction tool. So in Ariba, we have a couple of most commonly used auctions, and these are based on our experience from the BPC with our customers. So what we have been seeing for the time that we've been here, our customers, what are they mostly using? Mostly used auctions are what we call the reverse auctions. So we will see that in Ariba you have these different templates, but the reverse auction corresponds to an auction where prices will go down. The reverse auction will be able to then be separated in templates in out-of-the-box Ariba based on the way you want to ask for price. What does this mean? It means that in standard out-of-the-box templates, Ariba allows you to run a simple reverse auction where you have a simple competitive bidding where you ask the suppliers to give you only some information on price. And Ariba calculates the extended price by price multiplied by quantity. So you have a template, very simple, with all sorts of rules, but where you only request from your suppliers the raw price. We have another template available where we will be able to say, I want to run a total cost auction. So I'm going to include some cost terms other than the price, the quantity, and the extended price in the supplier's bid. So for instance, I'm going to create a TCO and I'm going to ask the suppliers to give me some bidding on the shipping cost. The third type of auction, which I would say for me it's the most used auctions for the last couple of years, is the reverse auction with bid transformation, where you will have the possibility to include factors other than price, but these factors are hidden from the suppliers, and the suppliers don't know that these factors exist. And the reason why Ariba introduced this is to allow a buyer to include other factors than price, like quality, like depreciation cost, like performance, and have an impact on the price and transform the price while the auction is running. So on top of these English reverse auctions, we also have what we call the forward auction, mainly used when you want to sell inventory materials. So materials, goods, it's usually used for goods when you have extra goods that you no longer need for a specific organization. The forward auction, for instance, in SAP, the IT department from SAP is using the forward auction for the computer material, everything that has to do with the hardware. Why? Because we resell the hardware that was already used to organizations who recover it and they reuse it. So forward auction prices will go up, and this is usually used to sell inventory materials, scrap materials, or materials that you no longer need within the organization. We have the Dutch auction, where I would say the Dutch auction comes from the tulip market in the Netherlands. And the Dutch auction is the most aggressive auction for both the buyer organization and the supplier. And we will see when to use this type of an auction. And in a Dutch auction, the buyer configures for the system to increase or decrease the price based on an increment of time and amount, and the bidding ends when a supplier accepts the price. We will see why the Dutch auction is so aggressive. The Dutch auction can finish when the timing is up, and the Dutch auction can have no bid at all if no supplier accepts the price that you are showing. It's aggressive for the buyer because the buyer is going to show a target price, so the price that he was willing to pay for that good or service that you are auctioning for. Japanese auction is the latest auction type that Ariba introduced, and we didn't have it until 2017. But the Japanese auction, which comes from from Japan and the automobile world, allows you to have suppliers in a Japanese auction who must accept a price threshold in order for them to continue. If they don't accept the price threshold, then they are dropped out. The bidding ends in a Japanese auction when a specific number of suppliers remain or when a price has been reached. Least, I would say, the last type of an auction, which is indeed not so very much used, but it is used from time to time, is when you want to run a index-based auction. And in an index-based auction, we will see you can either run it by amount or by percentage. So this is for commodities and categories where you negotiate with your suppliers an index. And this index, you can have a common index that you would, a ceiling index that you would agree with all of your suppliers to start with. And the index-based auction in 11 years, for instance, I think I had 2 customers who run it. So it's not very, very common, but it is available. Okay, so after saying English auction with reverse, total cost, and bid transformation, I would like to mainly focus on between the difference of total cost and bid transformation. Why? Because this is very important for you to understand that in Ariba, the way you ask for price and what you are asking from the suppliers is important, depending on what is the analysis of the market that you have done. So we have the ability to run what we call a total cost auction, guys. A total cost auction basically means you have a auction where you're going to be able to create a total cost of ownership, which is a formula in Ariba, and you will be able to include cost terms, which are added to the bidding item or lot, giving you as the buyer the visibility into the full cost of the service. For you to be able to run such an auction, of course, that you first need to already have some idea on how the suppliers are able to provide you the goods and an idea on the breakdown of the total cost. All cost terms are visible to suppliers, and the suppliers typically enter values for each of the costs. Here I have a very basic example, but you have the extended price, so which is price multiplied by quantity. And then on top of that, we're going to ask the supplier to give us the shipping cost and the import duty cost. As you can see here, everything is visible to the supplier. And the system calculation, which is the actual amount, which we could total cost, it's called in Ariba, the term, is visible both to the buyer and the supplier. The total cost is the competitive term in the auction. So the ranking, the best leading bid, everything that you decide to show will be based on the total cost. So the calculation is transparent to the suppliers, and all suppliers will see the same values of the best leading bid if you choose to show it. The bid decrement, so this is the amount or the percentage that is calculated from the amount that a bid must be lowered, and the ceiling price. The ceiling price corresponds to the starting price. So you would run a total cost auction when you are pretty much sure that the shipping cost that you have, the import duty that you have, the suppliers may give you better values for these cost terms. On the other hand, we have another template where you have the possibility to do bid transformation, guys. And what does this actually mean? Bid transformation means that you are going to have additional cost terms, but some of these terms may not be visible to the supplier, and they typically have different values for each supplier. We have on the right-hand side, you have the extended price, which is what? Price multiplied by the quantity. But then we have a switching cost and we have a performance modifier. These two type of costs are only buyer visible. Okay. They're only visible to the buyer, so the suppliers do not know that these cost terms exist. And they're taking into consideration to a system calculation of the total cost, which is only visible to the buyer. So, for example, imagine you have a switching cost that is 0% for an incumbent, but which is 5% for a new supplier, for a supplier X, and 7% for supplier Y. The total cost will take into consideration these percentages when you do your formula, and the 5% and the 7% will have actually a impact on the values that the supplier sees. So the leading bid will be different, the bid decrement may be different, and the ceiling price may be different. So we conclude that the total cost calculation may not be transparent to suppliers. The bid transformation, it is mainly used when we're going to see you want to bring dissimilar suppliers. What does this mean? Suppliers that you consider are so far apart that we cannot bring them into competition. But if we are able to quantify these factors, to put a money value behind or a percentage, we can use those factors into the auction, and we can have those factors impact the price. So here the example of the switching cost is where we have 3 suppliers who submit the same bid of 1,000, but which is then transformed based on the buyer provided values in the hidden cost terms. So basically in a bid transformation auction, the suppliers see one thing and the buyer sees another thing. The suppliers will always be competitive on what the buyer sees. So in here we have the 3 suppliers, the same price is applied everywhere, and we're going to have the switch costs that are the switching costs that are applied. And I can see that the 3 suppliers provided the same bid. However, behind the screens, guys, behind the screens, we're going to be able to identify the fact that, for instance, company one, which is big box retail here, they will see 95, but they're competitive actually on 100,000. Then you're going to have the server tech right here. What they will see is 100,000, but they are competitive on 105. Finally, this is an error here. They will see the same thing. So this is 100,000. The only ones who see different values are server tech and corrugated distributors. One, he will see 100,000, and then the other one will see 102. But what is mostly important is even if they see this, they think they're competitive on this, but behind the screens, they're actually competitive on this. Why? Because we apply the switching cost of 5%. This is one example. I have not seen very much the switching cost considered as a factor in bit transformation. In my experience, the elements that have been mainly used for transformation are the transportation cost. And these costs may vary between the different suppliers, especially if the suppliers are in different regions. Buyers quantify the additional transportation costs and they add them to the supplier's bid in the auction. These may include duties or custom costs if you're dealing with international suppliers. So transportation cost is very common, but the most common one, the most common factor used by customers is the performance. And the performance corresponds to the scoring, to the evaluation that a buyer does in the RFP. So you score the suppliers and you rank them in terms of the quality, in terms of the performance, of the technical performance of the requirement you want them to respond to. So we have the buyers who have, of course, we recommend you that you reaward higher outputs or efficiencies, higher reliability rate, or greater feature sets. Each supplier may respond differently in terms of quality to meet the same functional requirements. You will score them and you evaluate them and you rank them in terms of quality. Number one, number two, number three. Then we need to quantify this performance factor. And the moment you know that you are, for instance, number one, you may be a little bit more expensive, right? That you are number two or number three. This is, for me, the most used factor, cost factor in the bid transformation is the performance of the supplier responses from the RFPs. Then we have some other terms, which are the payment terms. This is, I would say, the second mostly used. The payment terms means if the suppliers accept SEB payment terms or not. You need to be able to take this into consideration because it does have an impact on the workflow capital. So if I need to accept payment terms of SEB, let's imagine that your payment terms are 60 days net. Some suppliers do not accept those payment terms and they say, we only accept 30 days from invoice date. This, you can take this and quantify this answer, and you are able to have it transform the bids of the suppliers so that you cover yourselves for that impact that the payment terms may have on you. We also have the risk. So the risk that the risk analysis that you may have in order for you to engage into business with that supplier, the quality, so it's the performance and the quality, capital cost, depreciation. What we have seen is that some supplier differences are very difficult to quantify, such as the switching cost or the quality differences. But what is important is that you try as much as possible to go in an RFP to make a very detailed RFP so that you are able to identify whether or not the suppliers are able to provide you with a better information for those tangible costs. If it's the the transportation cost, for instance, you're not going to run a bid transformation because the costs that you give may actually be challenged by a supplier where they can give you a better cost. So in that case, instead of doing a bid transformation, you do a total cost. In terms of best practices, so we will begin now a little bit with the with some set of best practices. I mentioned at the beginning of the session that for a buyer to run a successful auction, he needs a couple of things to take into consideration. First and foremost, we always recommend that you run a request for proposal to have a first set of prices and for you to assess the market conditions. You're not obliged to, we need a first round of prices. We need you to be able to have the supplier's responses to an RFP, which will be analyzed, and we will see that you're going to be able to include them as initial bids in the auction. But you need that first round of prices so that you are able to set up the auction in order for you to maximize the number of bids that you have in an auction. Your purpose is to maximize the number of bids by adjusting the market information. So what does this mean? It means the more bids you have from the supplier, you are more likely for prices to go down. So you need to be able to foresee the supplier movement in the auction. So for a buyer to run the auction, we need his knowledge of the market. We need his knowledge of the supplier relationship. And then we need the first round of prices for an RFP. And of course, if it's strategic sourcing and for global contracts and for strategic contracts, we need you to assess the supplier quality so that we are able to examine and take into consideration any cost terms that could impact the price. Second major piece of advice in terms of process is for you to run an internal auction with your stakeholders, with the business stakeholders, and so the internal stakeholders and the management, where you confirm your auction settings, formulas, market feedback, everything. Why is it important? Because we have seen situations where procurement runs an auction, they identify the winner, and the business refuse to work with the supplier, guys. So procurement makes a contract, makes an auction, they have prices, they go to the sites, and the stakeholders do not order from that supplier. So this is when the business does not necessarily agree with the supplier that is coming out. For this reason, to avoid this, because in that case, procurement organization and typically the buyer organization loses credibility towards the suppliers. So the next time you will ask the supplier to come, they will know that you are not being serious by awarding them an auction. So it's very important to get yourselves the approvals and the buy-in, I call it buy-in, from the internal stakeholders and the management. As far as the supplier communication or the external communication, everything that has to do with the suppliers who don't belong to your organization, so they're externals to the auctioning process, remember that they are coming to this auction with very different thoughts. Meaning sometimes some of them think that they are very competitive, but the analysis proves it otherwise. Sometimes they think that you are trying to drone them down with the prices that they cannot sustain. So it's very important that you communicate clearly and often with your suppliers Make sure that they understand the auction timing to provide and make them sure that they're registered on Ariba network and ready to participate to the auction, especially for those who have never done an event in Ariba. So remember that suppliers don't always like to be taken into an auction, especially your incumbents. So because the incumbents think that they're very competitive. Incumbent here means the current supplier that you have. Give suppliers time to prepare. Do not, do not underestimate the importance of explaining to them how does the auction works, what do you expect of them, what are the awarding criteria. Let them always know that they need to start with the auction with the starting price in mind and the last price. And as at their turn, they have to have the prices that they come with in Ariba, they have to be agreed and approved by their management. Why? Because in Ariba, they're submitting legally binding bids. You, both of you, so the buyer organization and the supplier are legally binded to provide the bids, and whatever bid I provide as a supplier, I need to respect the bid. And you as a buyer organization, you need to respect the awarding criteria that you have put down, that you have written down in the auction. So for suppliers to be able to familiarize themselves with the system and with the auction, we always recommend to run an external practice auction. You will see that I have a very specific way of explaining this, or I recommend my customers to run for each auction a training for their suppliers. A training, what does this mean? You show them to the screen like I'm doing here today. You show in a demonstration 1, 2, 3, 4 how to respond to your auction. And then you allow the suppliers to participate in a mock-up auction. Why? Because it's important for them to see that you are making efforts and you give them the tools that they need to actually participate in the auction. And this is important. It doesn't matter if you know that the suppliers have already run auctions. It's not a question of how many auctions have you run and you have already participated to thousands of auctions. It does not matter. We always need to have a process where for a successful auction to be run, we need that the suppliers are explained on each auction what do they need to do to respond to the auction. And I have an example for you guys of a deck if you want to have an idea of a deck. But for 11 years, I have had customers who are very big customers with 1,500 buyers in the world running auction program. And it's working very well when the buyer acknowledges the fact that in the process, I need in my timeline to take into consideration that I need to run a training for the suppliers. And a training means what? 1 hour training for all the suppliers. You have tools today. We have tools that are available in telecommunication and teleconferencing where you don't see any names, no one can speak. You demonstrate on the screen the steps to participate into an auction. And then the second part, you are actually inviting them to participate to a mock-up. In this slide, you see a collection of steps or questions that a buyer needs to ask themselves every time they want to set up an auction in Ariba. This is a reminder of all the elements that you need to take into consideration to run a successful auction. So some of the things are very basic, but some other elements in this list are extremely important and they will give you are using them. So the reason why you need to question yourselves about these elements is because this will tell you, the answer will tell you, will give you the information you need to choose your auction. So what are the goods and services that you are auctioning? Are you auctioning only goods? Are you auctioning services? Are you auctioning both? What is the line item structure? So you know that in Ariba, we have line items, which is the smallest pricing structure that you can have with a quantity and the price. But we also have the concept of the lot. The lot, which corresponds to a grouping of line items. We're going to see that in Ariba, in an auction, you can use the lot to do a couple of things. You want to award your auction in a specific way. You want to avoid cherry picking. You want to foster competition. So you are actually going to, not oblige, but you are going to put your line items in lots because you are putting, you're putting outside your awarding criteria. The number of line item and lots. How many do we have? 10, 20, 15, 100. What is the exact number of line items? Is there any cost formula you want to create to calculate some sort of a total cost? The RFP results analysis between supplier offers. This is where you usually provide the RFP document ID and you must proceed with a calculation, guys, of the differences between the suppliers' bids. So in an RFP, you have different bids, you have a number of suppliers, and you calculate their totals. And then you are supposed to calculate the difference between the supplier bids. What does this mean? One, you have a best leading bid. You need to calculate the difference between the best leading bid and all the other suppliers in percentage. Why is it important to do number E? Because the percentage will give you an idea of the auction type and the market feedback you will choose. In Ariba, if you are, for instance, at 1%, 2%, and you have a specific number of suppliers like 7, we can conclude that this is a market that is competitive and where suppliers are to be known. You need to tell them that this is a very highly competitive market. And the highly competitive means a specific number of suppliers, 7, and the difference between their bids is very low. So it means you are going to be aggressive in the way that you are going to push for competition. So it is very, very important that you analyze the supplier offers and you calculate the difference between these offers. You need to be able to know what are your awarding criteria of the auction and of the entire contract. What does this mean? Do I want to have 1 winner, 2 winners, 3 winners? What do I want to have? And if I want to have some savings, what is the percentage of savings I want to reach? A lot of buyers want to go into auctions, but they do not have any estimation of the target savings. We need to have some idea of we need to have the estimated target savings so that we are able to foresee the supplier bids in the auction when we do our calculations. How many suppliers will be participating? So one auction is not possible, but do we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 suppliers? The more suppliers you have, more likely of the competition. Have you negotiated all the contractual clauses that have an impact on the price before the auction? This is a major step. You need to be able to negotiate the contract the contractual clauses that have an impact on the price, because after the auction, you are unlikely to renegotiate those clauses. Should you not do this before the auction, you lose credibility with your suppliers and they will say, why am I supposed to go into an auction where Seb buyer comes afterwards and we start discussing the prices again? So the auction is to be considered the last moment, the last chance for the supplier and the buyer to discuss prices. So anything that has to do with payment terms, delivery terms, lead time, please make sure that you have the legal department involved, that you have the suppliers agree with the drafted contract document that you want them to sign, or if it's not on SEB paper, that you guys have the supplier paper agreed on, and all the contractual clauses that impact the actual price you're negotiating, please make sure to have them discussed and agreed upon by the legal departments. This also avoids you having, after the auction, 6 months time to negotiate contract. This is not possible if I run an auction and I have some prices. These prices are obviously, they have an expiration date. So for you to be able to wrap up everything, the contract and the contractual clauses that have an impact on the price from a procurement perspective, or even from a legal perspective, should be agreed upon before the auction. We recommend to have a code of conduct where I have an example. If you want to follow it, please be my guest. It's a code of conduct where we explain the responsibility of the buyer organization and of the suppliers in the auction. You are responsible of certain things, to respect, not to disclose the identity. You are not doing benchmarking with an auction. So we have different rules of engagement for the buyer organization, for the supplier. And finally, we need to be able to communicate to the suppliers that you are running an e-auction, and clearly. A lot of buyers do not communicate to suppliers, and in 1 week they want to run an auction. We don't need to seem rushy with these things, because in an auction, if we rush things, if we do not take the time to go through these questions, we actually end up making more harm than anything to the relationship itself with the suppliers and to the price as well. Okay, so the first point is more about questions that you need to be able to answer before coming to Ariba system to start configuring the auction. 2, as I said, run an internal auction to demonstrate to management and the business the setup on the answers to the checklist, so that you get the approval and the buy-in, guys. 3, request via service request event day management services for the buyers. This is called a direct line, and suppliers. We have a supplier coordination team. For your live auction, please create the service request at least 72 hours before the auction. And when I say please create, this needs to be the project owner. So the person who creates the auction in Ariba. The auction must be a live auction. It means that the field test project must be set to no. I repeat, when you create your live auction, the live auction must be test project equal no. If by any mistake you have test project equal yes, Ariba support will not follow your auction. And believe me when I tell you that there is no exception to the rule. What does this mean? It means that for the live auction, you really need to pay attention to this. Live auction must be test project no. And I insist on this because it has happened several times where we had buyers who created auction, live auction, run the auction, and it was set to yes. And buyer refused to recreate again and resend invitation because supplier would be confused. And 4th point, run an e-auction supplier training that it is composed of 2 parts. First part, step-by-step demonstration by buyer or buyer sourcing team on how to answer to auction as supplier. This is a copycat of your live auction where prices and suppliers are changed. So here you typically need 2 people from the organization, where you have 1 person who shows on the screen what is happening from a supplier side, and you begin from the invitation email. And then behind the screen, you have another person who will place the bids that will change the screen that you are showing in real time. You can record that meet session and give them a link to the suppliers to see the demonstration. But it's important that for each auction you do this e-auction. It usually takes 1 hour for everyone. 30 minutes for the demonstration, and then we have 30 minutes for the practice demonstration where suppliers are invited. This is a copycat auction of the live auction where only prices are changed. So a lot of customers tell me, but Simona, this is too much of a thing that you want that you want us to do. It is, yes, it is. But in time, we do 1 auction, 2nd auction, 3rd auction. In time, the more auction you do, you will see that this becomes part of your mindset. You are no longer thinking that you need to answer all of these questions. We always need to make sure that in the timeline of the auction that we want to run, we take this into consideration. So that's why it was important for me to speak to you about these things before you go to Ariba. Ariba is a tool, okay? You guys have all of these pieces of information already available, and ideally we want you to have them, of course, before the auction. Because if we don't answer to these questions, when we go to Ariba, the question comes anyhow. Because we will ask, how will you decide if this is best leading bid or if this is only rank? On what grounds are you going to decide? I know the market. It's not enough. We need to have data. Data is very important, and this checklist here provides you the elements to have that data. Now, as far as some auction settings are concerned, in Ariba, you guys will see that the first thing we need to do are the templates. So to decide what type of bidding rules we have, market feedback, what do we want to show or what we want to give you in terms of fields for you to manipulate. In Ariba, we will be very open with the fields because we want the buyer to be able to understand what are the possibilities. So what does this mean? It means that we will make available the bidding rules and the lot bidding formats, and we will allow a buyer to decide for each auction how he wants to open the line items. And in Ariba, we have 3 different openings: parallel, staggered, and serial. The parallel, staggered, and serial are to be used in the English reverse auctions. The serial opening will always be used for Dutch and Japanese. So in a Dutch and a Japanese auction, you can only use the serial opening of line items. Parallel basically means that line items open and close at the same time. So what does this mean? It means that the suppliers need to react quickly at the same time on all the line items. It may be a little bit overwhelming and difficult to track depending on how many suppliers you have and how many line items there are in the auction. Staggered, which is the recommended opening for buyers who have never run auctions. And usually in time, it's the most classic opening. We have all items that open at the same time, but they will close in cascade. So in a cascading fashion. This is easier for suppliers to ensure that they can participate on all the line items, but it prevents suppliers to adjust their strategy a little bit midway. The serial is items open and close at a time, so one after the other. This is generally not recommended for simple reverse auctions because it increases the time. In the bidding rules, we have what we call the, or in the timing rules, we will see that we have some overtimes. We call them overtime rules. And we recommend you to use the overtime option to ensure that suppliers have a chance to react to the last minute bid. We recommend you to trigger it for the last 2-3 minutes of the auction and allow lower ranks to trigger the overtime with a small supply base. So if you have, for instance, 4 suppliers and you award one single supplier, the rank that will trigger of the overtime, it's only rank 1. And here we've tried to make it a little bit more visual for parallel. All the line items open and close at the same time, so you decide on the duration of the auction. So the overtime rules, if any, they will. It doesn't matter which lot or line item triggers, but it applies to all of them. The staggered, all the line item open at the same time. We have a field called running time for the first lot, and this is it. And then we have a second field, time between lot closing, and this will govern this rule. In this example, you have 30 minutes for the first lot, and then you have a 10 minutes difference for the second lot. So I can open them all at the same time. I fight for 30 minutes on the first one. I may place bids on the other ones, but I have 10 minutes to concentrate on this one. Oops, sorry. 10 other minutes to concentrate here once second line item 2 is in review. The extension rules apply obviously for each and every of the they will apply on the line item. The last one is the serial line item, or lot number 1 begins and finishes until lot number 2 is open. Once again, the serial opening is mandatory. You cannot change it for the Dutch and the Japanese auctions. Market feedback. What does Ariba mean by market feedback in an auction? It means that the information that you are showing to the suppliers, guys. So I go back to the definition I gave at the beginning of the session. I said that auction is a real-time pricing negotiation. You set up the rules, suppliers fight, where you try to draw the prices down by providing market information. Market information means show them information, make them to move with the prices based on the information you are showing them. So depending on the market and the answers to the checklist, you may decide to show the best leading bid, which is the most intuitive form of bidding. It means that the suppliers will chase the lowest or highest bid. It can force suppliers to bid the best leading bid. I'm going to show the best lead of the auction, and that's it. It is recommended as a best practice for larger supply bases or markets that are naturally competitive. It gives less bidding activity overall, as non-competitive suppliers are weeded out and competitive suppliers respond to the lead bid. But once again, everything that you decide in here will correspond on 3 elements: the number of suppliers that you have, the awarding criteria, how many suppliers you want to award, 1, 2 suppliers, and the difference between the supplier bids from the RFP. This is what will tell you what type of market feedback are you going to show. Rank, you can run an auction that it's either rank only, so you are going only to show the rank, or you could use it in conjunction with the best leading bid in very highly competitive events to further incentivize the bidding. If you show only rank, it may be useful if the supply base is small or is sensitive, or if suppliers are concerned about price fixing. It's also useful to only show the rank when you specifically know that if suppliers see the rank, see the best leading bid, they will be scared and they will realize they are too far away from the best leading bid. So let's imagine that you have a supply database with 4 suppliers, and between the first and the second supplier, you have a difference of 10%. That difference, you don't want to show it because of the best leading bid. So you are only showing the rank. That allows you to hide the difference that you have between the first and the second. Okay, so there are a lot of situations where you may be in the case where the first one is 1 supplier and the other 3 suppliers are closer in bids but are at 10% difference from the first. You need to make sure to put yourself in supplier's shoes, and if I see a bid that is higher than 10%, will I ever place an offer? What will I say? I'm too far away to reach that. So you need to be able to hide that into the configuration by showing only the rank. Traffic light bidding is a new type of an auction where you have the possibility to display generic color-coded information to suppliers where you are indicating their status for each item. What does this mean? It means that you're not showing rank, you're not showing best leading bid, or you may show the rank and you may say, listen, you are very far away, you are red. Or you are very, very close, you are green. This is useful for very sensitive supply bases and in situations where you may want to evaluate other factors to make your decision. So this is available for now quite a couple of years, but I have not worked with suppliers that use it that much, with customers that use it that much. Here we have put together all the auction types. I'm not going to go through this. I'm going to leave you read this pieces of information because I would like to go to the examples. So for you a little bit to see what does the checklist provide you and how you can have your mindset, your thought. So we have Acme needs to source satellite dishes to provide television services for its customers. Few companies manufacture these satellite dishes, so the supply base is small and familiar with each other, so they know each other. There is concern the suppliers will be sensitive to revealing the pricing information and that competition will be low. So what do? We decide to do a reverse auction because we have a small supply base, so it means for suppliers, but we will hide the lead bid and the bid graph to minimize the anxiety over pricing details being shared and also prevent suppliers from dropping out if they cannot beat the best leading bid. If there are any other factors, quantifiable factors involved in the awarding decision, I may be using the transformation bidding to put suppliers into competition even if their prices aren't close. Consider using the traffic light bidding if you may not necessarily award to the best leading bid, but you cannot quantify those other factors. In your communication, make it very clear how the auction is awarded. Is the winner going to take it all? Are you awarding any business to the second or the third supplier? Make sure that you have flexible award structures that will be able to foster competition in markets that typically have none. When it says flexible award structures, it means that you need to be able to go beyond the only the line item structure. Combine line items, make yourselves commercially attractive, and consider to have different awarding scenarios so that you put in place with the lots in Ariba. Again, you need to have them bid. You need to have as many bids as possible on the line item or the lot. So sometimes, guys, it's better to ask the price, how suppliers can give you the price, not necessarily how you need the price. So for the flexible award structures means that try to turn before you come to Ariba, try your awarding criteria are clear, but try to put line items together if you have many and see how you can make suppliers provide as many bids as possible on those line items or lots because you want to group them together. Example number 2, it's on a Dutch or a Japanese auction. Paper Pro needs to source paper products for its stores. Price is the only determining factor for this auction. And after an initial RFP, there is concern that the level of competition will be very low due to a wide range of prices from suppliers. The Dutch reverse auction is a solution where you decide that the bidding ends when a supplier accepts all of the quantity at the current price. This will put a maximum pressure on suppliers to come up with their best bid price before anyone else and discourages waiting out on the market. Please bear in mind that the suppliers may be scared to participate in this auction type, as they get very little or to no market information. And in their minds, in their heads, they say, why am I going into the auction to compete against myself? They think that they compete against themselves because it is a very low competitive market. So 3 suppliers. For the Japanese auction that you can use, it's similar in style to the Dutch auction, except that suppliers accept price thresholds. So and if I don't longer accept the price threshold, I no longer place my acceptance. So suppliers opt out instead of opting in. I have a slightly more control, as items can be configured to stop once a specific number of suppliers remain or when a price has been reached. So that particular line item can be closed. So this is what I wanted to share with you in terms of best practices. This document and this presentation has mentioned several other documents, such as Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct is a document that I have available here. It's purely a example for you guys, but it's a document that you can include in your auction. You can have suppliers accept it as a prerequisite question, as a gate to the auction. And this document states the customer ethical commitments and the supplier ethical commitments. It's 2-page document that you communicate consistently with to the auction rules as outlined in the event, that you don't hold all supplier information, that you hold all supplier information in confidence and you not disclose it to other parties, that you only invite qualified suppliers and you not place phantom bid, like playing around in the auction and placing bids, that you communicate timely, accurate information regarding the business to all suppliers, any changes to corrections, to requirements, specification, and timelines, that you intend to award the business and you will not use the auction as a price discovery mission, also known as benchmarking. The buyer will award the business only to the suppliers submitting bids in the auction. In situations where a reserve price is established and no submitted bids meet the reserve price, a buyer can choose to have alternative solutions. The buyer shall not participate in offline after the auction negotiation. The buyer will communicate the award decision within the time frame. Do not force the supplier out of this business. Buyer will not modify the rules of a running auction. So these are some examples that are more from your side. So customer engagement, and then we have the supplier engagement, where the supplier is participating in any sourcing project constitutes acceptance of the reference and required terms. It holds the information on the buying company in confidence. The supplier participates in an auction only if qualified. So you see, it's a mirror. From the buyer, we have the same things for the suppliers. And usually these pieces of element can be in an NDA, maybe in your organization, but I like to make it clear that this is a responsibility for both the buyer organization and the supplier. We're not going into the auction with blind eyes, because if you do that, or because you think that the auction may save you time, this is a misconception, because the auction must be prepared. It can be run, and in time, once we run a couple of auctions, we become a little bit more proficient. So in certain of the steps, we can go faster. But such a thing, please make sure that you have such a thing so that things are transparent between you and the supplier organizations. And if, for instance, there is conflict, or that you do not find a solution for an auction, we usually say, here is a contact that you can use when we have some problems in an auction. If after an auction I have an issue, what is the contact that I should have? And this should be one contact for everyone. Okay, someone who has the authority, even in the system, and also with the buyer and the supplier, to make a decision. of the issue that has been caused. Okay, so this is one document that I have referenced in my presentation. The other one is the lotting. I was mentioning about lotting strategy and how should I put line items together. So in Ariba, you have line items, but you also have lots. What are what is the reason why Ariba provides these lots? Because you have the possibility to put line items together to meet your goals and objectives. Okay. Foster competition, so put more competition, reduce complexity, prevent cherry picking. I decide on this, I decide on that, this to a word. Drive a word scenarios or drive implementation scenarios. And we have some things that we consider you to read through when you want to do this lotting from the buyer side, but we also have things from the supplier side. Another document that I have been mentioning, it's the training. I have said that you need to run some training. This is an example of a deck that I've put together for customers where they can use it to drive their supplier training per auction. So each auction I have 1 hour. In this 1 hour, I have the SEB team who do a demonstration to the suppliers to show to log in and navigate, participate in the auction, read the settings and requirements, submit the bids, communicate with the buyer, communicate with Ariba help desk, and post-communication of the auction. And second part is where I simply have the suppliers participate into the auction. So here we have a screenshot with the content invitation to the auction. This is very old, but it's telling you that please make sure that you have your invitation notification with a link to the Ariba application. Use your previously provided logins, reset your password if needed. Make sure that the information on your profile is correct because Ariba may choose to call you during the auction. Okay, this is the user preference. And then we have here the test demo auction. This is where you switch to the system. And for each auction, I have this slide for best practices where it says review auction information requirements during the auction preview status. Validate the prerequisites to access the event. If any, guys, in my case, so I did this with the code of conduct. Log in 15 minutes prior to the live auction. For more information about biddable items, please click on the small I information. Bidding is at the lot level, and this slide here, it's a slide, you may modify it per auction. Bidding at the lot level. So in an auction, it could be lot. In an auction, it could be line item. We recommend to update, right, these elements. Award decision. The business awarded through this auction will be allocated by lot or by line item. Improve the bid by percentage on the lot level. Reserve price as guidance visible to participants. So these elements right here, these ones may be different and you are updating them for each auction. The rest is really the same. Monitor and send messages via message functionality for communication with the buyer team. Contact Ariba Helpdesk Vault for all Ariba technology related matters during the auction. Remain connected during the review period. Participate in the practice test event, which is the next step that corresponds to the supplier practice auction. And it's if you guys follow this process, not only that you will show to your suppliers that you are giving them the means, that you are spending the time, and that you don't want to rush things. So you make sure that they are available and they participate to these auctions. We also have the external event day management services. This is purely about EDM services. So what do the auctioning teams do for you? Remember, I mentioned to you in the meeting that you need to create a service request. The project owner creates service request where they ask the system, the Ariba, to have a coordination team, a market coordination team. Okay, this means what? You have SAP Ariba market coordination team who will be actually monitoring your auction. They should be contacted via phone due to the time-sensitive nature of an auction in progress. For all the other matters, such as events that are no longer in open status, or for events planned for the future, please raise a service request that can be submitted and will be directed to the responsible market integration specialist. I recommend you to run 72 hours before. So 3 days, guys. Direct lines, a direct line is only for the buyer. The buyer team may have a direct line to what we call the market coordination desk for auctions running less than 24 hours. Events that run longer than 24 hours cannot have direct lines. A direct line means that you have a direct line assigned for a limited amount of time. To set up the direct line to the market coordination desk, contact the market integration specialist on duty and place the request. The direct line can be requested by the project owner or a designated support contact and can only be assigned to events that are published and not test events, so live auctions. And here we have some details about this direct line. Please read these documents. If you have questions or things that you don't understand about these documents, please make sure that you respect. Here we say market integration are only guaranteed to offer direct line support in English. A request for Spanish maybe 1 day before. I say anyhow, the best way is to, it doesn't matter that it's English, for direct lines, best would be to place 3 business days in advance, so 72 hours by the project owner or the designated support contact. Okay, so what we're going to do is that I'm going to send you all of these documents, right? And from this presentation, when you guys see that you have a code of conduct, you go to the code of conduct. When you have service request, you go to event day management. When you have the training, you go to the training deck. So it's important that we go through all those documents. And the last thing that I wanted to show, I also have here some content that I can show with you. Oh, sorry. This is a little bit annoying, but okay, so just a second, please. I need to stop sharing because I have 2 Excel spreadsheets open. Okay, so this is content. This is some standard content that I have for auctions. The minimum pieces of information that you should have in your auction. So let me go back to share. This is an Excel spreadsheet, so we can use it to recreate content. Maybe you guys already have, but I would like you please to use this content to see what do we recommend you to do. This is really working. What is here is working for auction. So this information should be put into an auction. If you want to change it, of course, to apply to your world, that's fine. But we recommend you to analyze this content with the content that you guys may have, so that you make sure that it is included. And the last thing that I have here, it's a Dutch auction setting. So this is pretty much it's a file that I've built for Dutch auctions. You can use it for any other type of auctions, but it basically gives you some pieces of information on what you need to do. So the checklist I showed you answers you these questions. This is a Dutch auction where you have 2 suppliers. This is my best leading bid. So this is the best bid from the RFP. And your responsibility for a Dutch auction is to know how low can you begin compared to the RFP. In a Dutch reverse auctions, prices will increase. So your knowledge of the market is very important, because you will be able to identify whether suppliers are likely to begin almost 25% lower than the best leading price from the RFP. And this is here a calculation that I've made based on, I have a starting price, it's at 440 euros. So I have here a difference between the minimum, this is the minimum bid, and this difference is calculated in percentages. So will these two suppliers or will these three suppliers bear to start the auction at 25% lower than the best leading bid from the RFP? Then we have an increment of 2 euros. So amount on A, which is a difference of 0.45% out of the best leading bid. So you make the calculation to understand what's the difference here. Then we have the time. How long is the auction lasting? 30 minutes, 32 minutes, 35 minutes. And look, if I change this, it basically changes, right, the configuration, especially for the maximum price. The maximum price will be shown if no bid is displayed. And for the maximum price, what do you see? You see that this is always lower than the last price from the RFP. So do never go higher than this price. And least but not last, this is the saving. So it's a delta versus the minimum, maximum price versus the minimum. So these are for example of a file that I have put together to explain a little bit what do you need to do as far as the Dutch auction is concerned, the Japanese auction is concerned. These are the type of calculations that you need to make to understand, to foresee the supplier movements. Remember that in a Dutch auction, you are going to show the maximum price, the price you are willing to pay. So not to, you need to show a lower price than from the best price from the RFP. So I'm going to send you these documents and you guys, if you have questions, no problem. You can, you can of course ask me. And I think that now we can open up for questions.
Thank you, Simona. So we have about 5 minutes until the end of the session. Do we have any questions from the attendees?
So I have one. Has anyone run an auction? Has anyone run an auction in the system, in Ariba or maybe in other systems? Have you guys already run auctions?
We have run an auction only once earlier last year. That was our real auction in a live event, but that is the only auction that we have in the entire company.
So one auction last year.
Yes, but it's for small valued items, less than $500 USD. So
but the total value of the auction was less than $500.
Yeah, it's a small auction. It's we wanted to make it as our pilot auction. That is the first auction that we have done. So with this session, we hope that we can target more end users to try and use auctions in Ariba to get more value added and savings.
Guys, I mean, if I may explain a little bit something. So the auctions can be used for different purposes. You can use it to have savings. That's true. Bottom line savings, but it's not the only reason. An auction is run, for instance, because you want to optimize your supply database. What does this mean? It means that you may have 10 suppliers and you want to go to 2. So you're going down, or the other way around. I have customers who now used to have 1 supplier and they want to open up. So it depends. And of course, this is linked to strategy, category strategy, procurement, global strategies, commodities. But an auction the main purpose of the auction is not just to drive the prices down or to have savings. It could be because you want to foster competition. You specifically know that you have a competitive market, but suppliers don't want to play the game. So you're going to force them to go into an auction. Another way to do this is you run an RFP, and in the RFP, you will have a master purchase agreement or a master service agreement. So you're going to have a contract with 3 or 4 suppliers, and on a project basis, you can run an auction to negotiate the pricing for those specific projects. This is very common, right? So you have a master service agreement, master purchase agreement signed with 4 suppliers, but you have no value, right? There's no value to that contract. The value comes per project or per, it could be an order for a site. It all depends on what is the contract all about and the commodity. But the pricing or the pricing negotiation can come, and this is very common with our customers, to say, I have my master level agreement signed, but now I have a project for a site. It could be to a maintenance project to replace all the equipment in the site, or it could even mean, this is more service-wise, so it's complex services, or it could be also that you have a purchase level agreement, but there's no actual monetary amount, right? So in that case, you have some separate prices, some rates, but you need, for a specific case scenario, you run an auction, and it's working very well. So yes, of course. Or if you want to, if for global strategic sourcing is when you want to change supplier, this is very often the case where you run an RFP with new suppliers, you run a second RFP with the suppliers, you align them, you realize that actually they may be slightly different than your incumbent, but they're good and they can provide you, they're more competitive. They do things differently, but they can shake a little bit the incumbent who is in a monopoly situation with you. For sure, you have commodities where prices go up instead of going down. And it's not only about the market price, and it's because the raw material price has increased. We know that some cases raw material price increases, so we can only go up. It's true. But sometimes it's because the supplier has control over you. You can try to shaken this up. And of course, you can decide to go through an auction where newcomers can shake a little bit up the incumbent, and if the incumbent is ready to keep the business, they will make the necessary efforts. If they're not, you also need to accept that you and your stakeholders as well, that you may have a new supplier that you need to work with. So if this is the case, it means that you have some switching costs, something that has an impact on the process. What is that impact? You need to take that into consideration. Bon, but this is really, I mean, I can see we have different colleagues here, buyers, I guess that we have different commodities. So the next step would be for us to meet and go to your system and go to templates. I typically recommend that everyone comes to the meeting so that a buyer sees what they have available. Okay, what is available in the template? What do we make available in the RFP? And we need to see what do you guys have there? What you decided when Ariba was opened up for you, when you implemented Ariba, because typically we try to make it very simple. I have one template of auction. But when we introduce Ariba, because situations are different, you cannot always run reverse auctions. We need to know that you have Dutch auction, Japanese auction, and available. You're not locked just to reverse auctions. So for this, we also need to see if you have the Japanese auction enabled in your realm. I would be very glad to guide you through the templates, to explain the rules, to explain what are the best practices, what you should enable, what you should not enable, and try to see if you can, yeah, enable them, test them. And when you guys have an auction, you can do your configuration, and if you want, we can come back to BPC and say, oh, Simona, we have an auction. Is it possible for you to look a little bit at this auction to tell us if you see any elements? And then we can go to the auction and pinpoint the things that I see, which are very important for the auction.
Okay, so so how do we do it? We share you the project ID first of the template, and then once you have reviewed, we do another BPC session
No,
together.
no, no. Next, what we do next, we need to agree on a time
Okay,
where we meet again, and
okay.
with all of you, and someone from SEP goes to production system. We're not going to test. It's too complex. I mean, it's too complex. No, but we go to production and we
Mm-hmm.
look at template. We
Okay,
look at templates. We see what you have available. We
okay.
show the template that is available, and I explain to you what we recommend in terms of templates, what to have and not to
Okay.
have.
Mm.
Simona, Katini here. I have
Yes.
a question to ask.
Yes.
Right. All right. It's very excited. Okay. On the reverse auction with bidding transformations,
Mm.
we have the custom which is visible to the supplier and not visible. I mean, visible to the supplier, and some are the custom which is only visible to the buyer itself, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, during the auction process itself, when
Mhm.
they auction the price, which they supply, they put the price in their extended price custom, and will it be automatically calculated based on our hiding costs
Yes.
for us to decide?
Yes.
It's like
So
more towards education process for us to look.
you're not going to tell them anything.
Yes, yes.
You
It's
show
just
them
like
the screen, and you say, you place your bid here. This is what you see here. This is the
mhm,
bid decrement. This
yep.
is the best leading bid. This is the rank. This is how you need to place the bid. They don't know. They don't need to know.
All right.
This is
Okay.
the tricky part. I mean, this is
Yeah.
not the trick, but it's a special template
Yes. Yeah. It
that we
is.
have, and you don't modify it. But what it's in the simplest thing that you do, you need to see, because it's very different than what you imagine.
Yep.
Let me give you an example. You say, for instance, that you have an amount 100 euros. You
Mm-hmm.
say you make a plus to your extended price or to your unit cost.
Mm.
What does the system do for supplier side? It does the other way around. So it says, I'm going to have 100 euros for 100 quantity, and you say, I want to add 100. What does the system do? Says, we have 100 euros unit price, 100 quantity. It
Mm-hmm.
means, I show you this. But the system behind, in your view, will say 100 multiplied by the 100 plus 100.
Another 100.
So I'm
Yes.
going to be competitive on 100 and 110.
Yep.
But supplier doesn't know. He
Mm.
only sees the raw pricing. They will see the
Mm.
raw prices that they,
Mm.
or the transformed bids that they think they have. And I've done this for so many commodities, for
Yeah.
computers, for
Yep.
services, for maintenance, for equipment, it's very, very, it does not matter the commodity as long as you can quantify it.
Mm. All right. So,
And the
I,
the
yeah,
best
go on.
way is to simplify. Don't imagine yourselves complicated things.
Mm.
Simplify. A plus, a minus, or a multiplication, and the
By
system.
percentage, probably, right?
Sorry.
We can eat probably in the form of percentage over the price.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
you can. Yes.
Okay.
But you need to imagine yourself. You're going to say in the formula that it adds, and
Mm-hmm.
for the supplier, the system does the other operation. It will
Yep.
remove. If you say that you remove, so it's a minus for this, for you, it means that for the supplier it adds. So
Yeah.
there's a logic here that you need to see when you test. And of course, for the percentages, you say you multiply, but for the supplier will be the other way around. And it's very, very much used, this one.
Yeah. 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 Right, that's good. And then on the cost term, is there any maximum cost term that we can add?
But
None.
here, guys, I mean, you can do whatever you want,
Yep.
but I mean, you can do very complex things or very.
Mm.
This is what I'm telling you. Simplify. Don't do an auction. Well, don't do. We do not recommend to use several
Yeah, cost terms.
transformation costs,
Yep.
because then you're going to you yourself with the auction formula, you're not going to understand it. So
Yep.
try to combine everything in one and quantify it.
Yep.
Make it a percentage or so.
Mm.
For the total cost auction, that's where you can configure a more complex formula, because you can do multiplication, plus, minus, this and this and that, because you're asking them to give you the prices. But for
Yep.
transformation, only use one.
Right.
Only one hidden cost term that will transform the bid. For the total cost auction, you can do, you can have internal elements that you are putting in there and they will see, and also some external elements, but you are transparent with the calculation and they know.
Mm.
There's
Right.
no, I mean, in competitive bidding, you know that you can go to 20 terms, but let's think this through a little bit. Who sits in front of a computer and plays price and 20 terms? It's too much.
Yes, I agree
And
with you.
sometimes you need to be a little bit pragmatic and say, why am I going to do all the 20 terms? No,
Mm.
I'm going to put the 20 terms. They can see the 20 terms, but they are only going to place one, because the rest, I know that they cannot give me better.
Mm. Okay.
And of course, sometimes it's worthwhile calculating what does 80% of the total cost of the total business mean. And if it means that you have less items that have higher price, and then the 20% correspond to a lot of items, but it's only 20% of your contract, you are only going to negotiate and put in the auction 80% and say, this is 80% of the total value of the contract. Whoever gets the 80% gets the 20.
Mm.
Yeah, so you're not always going to auction everything.
Yep. Yes.
So to answer bluntly to your question, we have a limit, because technical limit you have for one item, you have 30 terms.
Yeah.
But and if you are in an RFP and you are in a standard RFP, you have 30 terms. And if you are in a large capacity event, you are 50. But does it make sense to put 50 terms? It's
Yep.
50 columns. Imagine it's the Excel of 50. We need to optimize this information. So make it a little bit more optimized. 50 terms, okay, it's good, but it's too detailed for an auction.
Right. For the cost term, I don't think we are going to put that many, because in consideration we have run the pre-qualification for the suppliers itself. Okay. Simona, I have to go because I have to attend another meeting.
No
Um,
problem. Yeah,
uh,
nice to meet you all.
yeah. I'll be in contact with you again through Siti Sumaya, because in under category management and strategic sourcing unit, we have one tender which it is a term contract for sourcing of the cables and conductor. It's a material sourcing. So we opt for the auctions during the term, and then we have yet to develop the sourcing project and the process per se, and we need your help with that.
You mean the RFP process?
Yes, right.
Okay.
I'll be in contact with you through Siti Sumaya later.
Okay.
I have to go. Nice meeting
Okay.
you. Nice
Nice
meeting you.
meeting you as well.
And have a nice day.
You too. You too.
Okay.
Have a nice end of the day, guys.
Uh,
Because for you, it's getting it's getting closer. We have a 6 hour difference. So you guys, it was 1:30 for you. It was 7:30 for me. So we will try to arrange like this. Um, anyone else? Well, I hope that you found this session interesting. I hope that you feel that it's not a mountain that you cannot cross, guys. It's you were taking it little by little, and um, the most I would say that the takeaway is that it's not just a system. A successful auction means that we take into consideration the knowledge of the buyer, of his commodity, of the suppliers, and we have a system. We put a couple of questions on a sheet of paper, and then we configure the auction. We get approval internally. Once we got approval internally, we create service request, we create live auction, and we train the suppliers. So it's the first one, the second one, the third one. Of course, that the more monetary value you have behind an auction, like 2, 3, 4, 5 million dollars, euros, it becomes, of course, a lot of it's more it's high values, right? So ideally you should be able to run the same process for very high value negotiations, medium, and also low value. But low value for me means 10,000. It doesn't mean 500. 500 is, I'm not going to spend any time for 500 unless I have 500, but I multiply it with a very high quantity and I arrive to 50,000 extended price, 500,000. So the total value is so 500 is it's for me it's like yeah, we're going to just do an exercise, but it's not a real negotiation, because real negotiations mean when you have a unit price, you have some quantity behind, you're not going to engage on the quantity, but this is what you currently have ordered in the past. So you have some quantity to give the suppliers. And it's in an auction, we are giving prices for the quantities that we see. So that's it. It's very important that we take this into consideration. If I do rates, a rate means what? A rate, it means the price of a consultant, the price of a machine installation. But I have different sites. I have different things that I can take into consideration to make myself commercially attractive to the suppliers. But anyhow, let me send you all this information. You, Siti, we can decide with Abhishek also on a next session. And
Yep.
next session, I want it to be less driven by me speaking to you, but I want it that we go to the system, that you guys
Okay.
manipulate, and I want you to take hold of the auction templates and know what happens if you enable certain rules
Yep.
from there, and we should be able to start start doing some testing. I need you to be confident with whatever you have in the system. If you do this, what happens? If you do this, what happens? And we're not going to be able to test every possible combination, but we test the logic. You need to enter
Yep.
yourselves in the mindset of, whoa, okay, if I do this, what happens? What's the impact? If I do this, what happens? And it usually works pretty much the same. Where you go into an auction, you always have a ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, things that are really, regardless of the auctions that you have, you should always be sure that you have answered to those questions. Now, though that checklist, it's things that I've put together for years. Okay, so
Yep.
it's years and years of running auctions with customers and buyers. More, experienced buyers, more or less experienced buyers, it doesn't matter. If we manage to go through those, we make sure that we have the necessary elements that allow us to make the decisions that we want to make with the suppliers. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the messages, and let's keep in touch.
So, yeah, so we'll arrange another BPC session to look and deep dive into the templates. So if the attendees here have any other follow-up questions, we will send via email and we'll communicate through emails. Okay.
Yes.
So thank you for your time and thank you for the session today. It was an eye opener and I hope everyone um, now understand a little bit more on the auction. So with that, we can adjourn the session. Thank you so much, Simona.
Thank you. Thank you for
Okay.
organizing it. Keep in touch, and
Yeah.
I'm going to send you right now the documents.
Okay. Thank you. Goodbye.
You are welcome. Bye bye. Bye everyone. Have a good one.
Bye, you too.
Bye. And for okay.